welcome to Have Guitar Will Travel, presented by Vintage Guitar Magazine, with your host, me, James Patrick Regan, otherwise known as Jimmy from the Deadlies. And today, I'm speaking with the amazing guitarist, singer, and guitar builder, Paul Pigat. In our conversation, Paul discusses comparing the new Fender Tone Master amps to his 1964 Fender Deluxe. Paul tells us about his tour schedule and the rigors of touring his Canadian homeland, both solo and with his band, Cousin Harley. He also describes what it's like booking himself. Paul talks about his guitar building business, most of which he sells on Facebook and Instagram. Paul describes his guitar collection, including a few highlights: a Wandre Bridget Bardot, a 1931 Gibson L5, a Larrivee Nylon string, and a Gibson 350 and ES125 TDC. Paul talks about growing up in Toronto, playing in bars starting at age 13, and going to the University of Toronto to study classical music with a degree in theory and composition, and what brought him to the west coast of Canada. Paul tells us about his Rockabilly instructional DVDs, which are legendary, and he talks about his current Patreon lessons and private lessons. Paul describes when he decided to start singing and his love for swing music and his love for Tony Bennett and the era of the crooners. Paul talks about Cousin Harley's new record, Cousin Harley Plays the Blues Volume 1, which is late 40s jump swing music. And Paul tells us about living in China and what it's like to play to a Chinese audience. You can find out all you want to know about Paul at his website, paulpigat.com. That's PAULPIGAT.com. And Paul is very active on the socials, particularly Facebook and Instagram. Please subscribe, like, comment, share, and most of all, review this podcast. I'd really appreciate it. And please support Vintage Guitar Magazine and all the wonderful things they do for us guitar players, because you know what? They do so many wonderful things for us guitar players. Here's my good friend Paul. Hey there, Paul.
That's insane.
This is modern technology.
Dude, I still have tube amps. That's all I gotta say.
So do I.
That's because they sound better. Although they're getting, I tell you, those new Fender Tone Master amps are pretty close.
Really?
I think so. I ordered one. I of course promptly sold it because I'm an idiot. But I ordered one of the first Deluxes, and I took it out to some gigs, and I thought, this thing sounds great. And then you can't compare apples to oranges. So I put it against my real 64 Deluxe reverb, and
Look, what's your hand look like?
My nails are in terrible condition. Look at these things; they're disgusting.
Yeah, but are those real nails?
They're acrylics. But I've been doing lots of nitro finishing, and I don't wear gloves, and man, nitro gets on it, and it just gets underneath the nail, and it looks gross.
So, are you gigging like regularly right now?
I'm starting out. It's been a quiet fall. I had a crazy summer last summer. Of course, as every musician does, they predict, this is going to be a quiet year. Yeah. And then, stupid me, I said yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I was literally I was road dogging at home from I'd finish up in northern Alberta, and I'd road dog at home, and then the next day I'd be like on Vancouver Island, and then the next day I'd have to fly to Toronto, and it got stupid. So I was very lackadaisical about booking a summer this year.
Uh-huh.
But so I have a feeling it's going to be quiet. But things are starting to ramp up. I've got a Cousin Harley gig coming up this weekend, and then lots of stuff that's sort of little side projects like Adventures in Steel Guitar, and then I head off to Ontario to do some work with a rhythm section that I have over there that we do Cousin Harley material, and then I'll do a bunch of solo stuff, which has been. I actually just did a gig opening up for a 9-piece ska punk band.
Wow.
Playing solo.
Wow.
So I brought out a Telecaster and just cranked the amp and played Cousin Harley by myself.
Oh, right on. Essentially, Cousin Harley is you, right?
I am Cousin Harley.
Yeah, I get it. and so you have backup bands on both sides of your country. I
do now. It's just, man, the gigs just don't pay what they used to, so it just and also my guys are super busy. Like, they'll always be the core trio, my West Coast band, but I ended up meeting a couple of guys last time. Well, not last time, but maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I was in Ontario playing, and they already knew my material. Like they said, "Yeah, we know all your Cousin Harley stuff." So I said, "Okay, great, let's do a gig." And then they sounded awesome. So I said, "Okay, whenever I'm in Ontario, you're my guys now."
Yeah. Did you go to NAMM this year? Have you been to NAMM any year recently?
I have not. The last year I was there was 2019.
Okay.
Did you go?
I did. I went this. Yeah, I've been every year that they've had it, even when it was COVID times.
Right. How was it?
It's getting back to what it was.
Oh, good.
It'll never be 2019 again. But
right.
But Gibson was there, albeit a small postage stamp and Fender was there again as a postage stamp. So.
Oh, I didn't even know they were attending.
Yep, they were there. They were there. Oh. They had a bunch of special events that that you should have been at playing, and
I don't. The only person I hear from now is Fred.
Okay.
Joe was my guy, and then Adam Bowen Smith, who was the UK rep.
Yep.
They were big supporters. But actually, I don't really know anybody there anymore. But I'm sure I could make myself acquainted with them again, which maybe I will.
Yeah, you should, well, I mean, only if it's profitable for you. That would be the reason to do it.
Well, as they say, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and they were always very generous with their publicity.
Oh yeah, of course. So you mentioned, was it last weekend or earlier in the summer? You had a gig in northern Alberta.
Yes.
Would that be Edmonton? And what does that road trip look like? What does that entail as far as man hours?
Okay, so I did it in 2 stages. So I went out with the guys, with the trio. So we drove. I'll see if I can get this. So we drove from Vancouver to Penticton, which is about 6.5, 7 hours.
Okay.
Played a show that night.
All right.
Then woke up at 5 a.m. Drove to Robson Valley, which is about another 8 hours. Closed the festival that night. Woke up at 5 a.m. to drive through because they had to get to Edmonton, which is really normally only about a 5.5 hour drive, but there had been a huge wildfire that basically destroyed Jasper, right?
Yep.
We had to go through that highway, and luckily they had just opened it up, but it was only open from 7 to like maybe 5 o'clock at night. So got the guys up at 5. We got to that highway and made it through, and then played at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Edmonton Blues Festival.
Wow.
Then I flew the guys home, and I continued by myself. And so straight home from Edmonton was, I did it. I literally road dogged it. I did it in 12 hours, so no stopping.
Yeah. That's insane.
Driving is for West Coast Canadian musicians, you got to be a good driver.
Yep. That first stop that you mentioned, it started with a V, I think.
Oh, Penticton. Yeah.
So what is that town like?
Penticton is a great little vacation town. It's right smack dab in the middle of the Okanagan, which is like the fruit belt for Canada,
all right,
or at least for Western Canada. And there's a little venue there that I've been playing for years. I've been playing there for at least 15, 20 years. And it's called the Dream Cafe. And, it's kind of like an anomaly because it's a little dinner theater that has... basically, like, I've known it through the original owner, and it was his baby, and now it's run by a co-op.
Okay.
But it's something that shouldn't exist, but does, and it's an essential gig for touring musicians because you can leave Calgary and drive to Vancouver, and there's really not a lot.
Yeah.
To play. Like, there's not really good gigs where you're going to get a decent house and make a decent amount of money.
Sure.
And you can do it almost on any night of the week.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Penticton. They also have a little. There used to be jazz festivals that were called Terrific Jazz Parties up and down the coast. I don't know if you remember those, and they were all Dixieland trad festivals.
Oh wow!
I think there's still one going in Sacramento, and then the one in Penticton is still going. And you remember my friend Tommy Harkenrider?
I think so.
Yeah, he's the blues. He's from Anaheim.
Okay.
He's a blues player from Anaheim, and he comes up and plays it. So now I'm going to try and coordinate a gig up there while he's up there, so we can hang out.
Yeah. Very cool.
How you been?
I've been good. The same as you, playing, and trying to make a living, basically.
Well, you never do.
So in a year, last year, how many gigs did you do?
Oh, not nearly as many. I would say maybe over the course of the year, maybe 80 to 100 gigs.
Okay.
Maybe at the most. At the most. I spent a lot of, because I teach as well, so my time is taken up with teaching. I got a 9-year-old daughter, which takes up a lot of time.
Sure.
And I've been building guitars, so the guitars have been popping out left, right, and center, man.
Yeah. And are they all custom order, or are you just making guitars and shipping them to stores?
It depends. I'm not shipping them to stores. Like I shipped out 2 yesterday, or 2 last week. I have another one that's going to Texas later this week. I have 2 more commissions to do, and then I'm building a couple just for fun. Like I decided I was going to do a weird Bigsby style guitar. And then I make these sort of surf guitars that I call Elroys. And a friend of mine, a fantastic amp builder here in Vancouver, Gary Economy, his wife is dealing with Alzheimer's right now. So I said I would, and he makes these wonderful little amps, and he reuses, he'll find all this old electronic equipment and make beautiful amps out of them.
Okay.
So I said, listen, I found a little sort of 4-watt tweed Princeton that he had made and put in this wonderful little Heathkit casing. And I said, I'm going to make a guitar that matches that, and we can sell it as a set, and then we'll donate all the money to Alzheimer's.
Oh, right on.
So I'm just finishing that up, and it's all over the place. Now I'm building an OM for myself because, why not?
Yeah, exactly.
I have access to this incredible shop.
Yeah. Is it your shop, or is it?
No. The fella who made all my acoustic guitars, Warren Murfitt, it's his shop, and it's he's been in this space for over 30 years.
Wow.
So it's big. It's a big shop. It's got everything you'd ever want in it.
Yeah.
And it's got a stage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he puts on shows here. He had a show last weekend, and that my only issue is when he puts on the shows. That means I got to clean the shop.
Yeah. And what's your guitar collection look like outside of the guitars that you build?
Oh, I've liquidated a lot recently.
Okay.
I sold my '64 Jazz Master. I sold my 1960. Les Paul Special. I sold my 55 Les Paul Custom.
Wow.
I sold the 1956 ES350T.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I had a pretty nice collection for a while, but the flagship. I still kept the flagship. I have 2 flagships of my collection that aren't going anywhere.
Okay.
I've been searching for a Wandre BB. You're hip with Wandre? You know Wandres?
Nope.
They're Italian. They're from his name was Antonio Poli, was the designer. They're art.
Yeah.
Basically, if Barbarella played guitar,
oh, right on.
these are the guitars she would play. And they're completely art guitars. And I've been looking for a BB, which is designed the initials BB are for Bridget Bardot.
Oh, okay.
It's very curvy. It's a hollow body. I've been searching for one of those since I was 18.
Yeah, okay.
And I found one a couple of years ago, so that's in the collection. That's never going anywhere because that's literally, as a builder, that's the height of aesthetic, of pure aesthetic. They're not the most wonderful playing instruments, but they're just the most gorgeous things you've ever seen.
Okay.
And then another guitar that was a dream guitar. I've been searching for a pre-1934 Eddie Lang style L5. So I found one of those about 3 years ago, and it was. It's something I've wanted forever.
Sure.
Do I need it? No. Do I love it? Yes.
Yeah. Does it have a cutaway, or is it no cutaway?
No. It's 1931, so there's no cutaway.
Oh wow.
It's a small body L5 too.
Oh, wow.
It's a 16-inch L5. So it's like the guitar that Eddie Lang played. So it's the beginning of jazz guitar.
Right on. That's badass. Did you grow up in Vancouver?
No, I grew up in Toronto.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
How'd you end up in Vancouver?
I came out here in '93 for a vacation.
Okay.
And I liked it a lot. You know, I have an older brother, and he backpacked across the country. You know,
Wow.
back when that was a thing you could do. And I remember him telling me stories about you know, the West Coast. And I came out here in '93, and you know, I was visiting a friend who I knew from high school, and then you know, I went back, and my life was crazy and weird, and I found myself doing a 2-week stint in Thunder Bay, which is, you know, that's the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
And I just said, you know what, this is enough. And I finished the 2 weeks. I took a bus to Timmins. So that's about 6 or 7. I forget how many hours. It was a long bus ride. And then I have a little place. My brother and I have a little camp up in Timmins. And I spent 2 days there, and then drove home, which is that's an 8-hour drive, and was on a plane the next day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you must have studied music when you were in Toronto.
Yeah, I studied at the University of Toronto.
Okay. All right. And did you get a degree?
Yeah, I have a classical music degree in theory and composition.
Wow. Oh, right on. And so it was all nylon strings?
All nylon, all the time.
Yeah. But what were you listening to back then?
Well, I was still playing in bars. Like, I started playing in bars when I was 13 or 14.
Wow.
So I was listening to, like, I was still a rocker. I had a lot of rock in me still at that point. But I was getting more into hot rod country stuff.
Sure.
At that time. And I was playing a ton of blues. Like, I was playing blues all over Toronto. And that was I studied with a guy named Ellie Kastner, who was a really important figure in Canadian guitar playing. He brought the first legitimate program for a university to Toronto, and he was Austrian. He was a Jewish guy from Austria. He escaped the war and moved to Spain and studied with Segovia, and Ellie loved that I played rock and blues music. So he would bring all these guitar players from around the world to perform in Toronto, because that was back when Toronto was a really big guitar town back then.
Sure.
With Leona Boyd, and Leona Boyd studied with Ellie. Everybody studied with Ellie, and every time he would bring someone over, he would say, "Paul, come downstairs. You have to come play with these people." And he would get me to play with. And I said, "Well, no, I'm not going to play any stuff with these guitar players that they know. This doesn't matter. Play the blues with them." He thought it was so novel. And I'd have the strangest experiences. Like he would come up. I'd be, because I would study. I would teach at his place as well.
Yeah.
And I was teaching at his private studio, and he would come upstairs and he would say, "Paul, you must come downstairs right now. We'll have tea." And I said, "Okay, all right. If Ellie says I gotta go." So I went downstairs, and there's John Williams.
Oh wow.
Sitting in the kitchen, and I'm having tea with John Williams.
Was your brother musical, or were your parents musical?
Nobody.
No. How did you get the bug?
Well, my brother had a good record collection.
Okay.
When I finally got allowed to listen to his record collection, that's when I started getting into it. But I don't know how it started. My cousin had a guitar, and I remember being, of course, having no musical. There was nothing in school. It was before I started taking any music classes in school or anything. Uh-huh. I just was completely confused by it. And then I guess when I started, when I started playing in orchestra, I guess I was about 9 or 10 when you get to start that in Canadian schools. I really enjoyed playing the upright bass.
Okay.
I really
all right.
That was kind of my bag. So, and then my teacher at the time told my mother that on some teacher day that if Paul shows any interest in any musical instrument, you should get it for him, because he obviously likes doing this. And so I was going to play upright bass. I thought upright bass was awesome. I loved playing it.
Yeah.
But then like a little 10-year-old boy trying to carry an upright bass home on the bus in Toronto in the middle of the winter. You very quickly say, "Screw that! I'm not going to play this instrument."
Early on, what were you playing? As far as did you have a high-end classical guitar when you were studying at the University of Toronto?
When I was at the U of T, I bought. It's very Canadian of me. I bought a 1972 Larrivee.
Oh wow!
guitar, which, in 1972, if you know the history of Larrivee, he's lived in, like, he built out of Toronto, then he built out of Victoria, and then he built out of Vancouver, and now it's all down in the States. So this is an early 1972 Indian Rosewood Larrivee nylon string, and it would be, I think I've seen one other one that was earlier than mine.
Wow.
It's a very early one, so that's the beginning of, like, if you know about Canadian luthiers, there's a whole school of them, right? There's Grit Laskin and of course Linda Manzer, who made the Picasso for Pat Metheny.
Okay.
They all were building at the same time, and they were all learning from each other. So it's part of that scene, that guitar.
Wow. And when you were playing in blues clubs, what were you playing?
Let's see. I made a bunch of, because I was just starting to make guitars.
Oh, okay.
But I probably, the one guitar that I used the most was, I had my very first electric guitar was a 1981 Fender Bullet.
Okay.
And I used that.
All right.
That was my guitar. Yeah.
And do you have the Larrivee or the Bullet anymore?
I still have the Larrivee.
Oh, right.
I sold the Bullet to my brother's best friend, so I still know where it is, and I can still use it anytime I want. I've owned two more since then, because I thought they were just great guitars.
Oh, yeah.
Mine was the basic Bullet, which was, that sort of pseudo Telecaster shape, where the pick guard was made of metal, and it's actually the end of the bridge as well. They just ran saddles through a flipped up part of the pick guard.
Yeah.
It's super primitive, and they're made out of plywood.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I loved it. I think it just had a vibe. It had a great feeling neck, and it did everything I wanted. It was simple, right? I don't like guitars with too many knobs or too many pickups.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
I get confused. I'm a simple man. I can't take anything more than, I'll go three. Three knobs are the most I'm ever going to
do. So you started teaching pretty early on in your musical life there.
Yeah. So before I went to university, I went to this really sort of blue collar school, and because we lived in a blue collar area, or almost the projects, but. When I decided I wanted to go to a school of the arts, so I had to apply for the School of the Arts, and I got in. There was no problem for me to get in, and so we had grade 13 at that point. Like, that's in Ontario. That's basically, you go to grade 13 before you go to college or university.
Okay.
And so I did grade 13 there, and I started teaching there because my teachers asked me to teach the younger students, and then when I went to the University of Toronto. I had my choice of three different universities. I chose U of T because Ellie was there, and I was a huge fan of Ellie.
Okay.
And within the first 6 months of me studying with him, he had me teaching at his place too. So.
Right on. And when did you really get hooked on rockabilly?
Oh, there you go. Well, I got really hooked on it when I moved out west.
Okay.
Like I'd always dabbled in it, and I was certainly interested. I was a big fan of the Stray Cats and Robert Gordon. I had a Robert Gordon record when I was a kid.
Sure.
But when I moved out west, finding a rockabilly scene in Toronto, there was certainly people there. There was bands like the Razorbacks and the Tin Eddies, and there was some great bands, but it wasn't a really vibrant scene. But when I moved out west, and I started, even though I moved to Victoria, I started hanging out in Vancouver a lot, and there was a very, very vibrant scene of hillbilly and rockabilly music happening here, and I ended up really getting along with everybody. Well, we were all crazy and derelict.
Sure.
Yeah, we're living the life, as they say. But I that's where I met my first rhythm section was Ray Kondo's rhythm section, and I'm still, Ray was a friend of mine until he passed, and I'm still, if I say is there any band that's ever influenced me, I would say there's two. There's the Paladins, and then there's Ray Kondo.
Okay, right on. And how early on did you start singing?
That's that. All right. So I moved out west. 1994, moved out west. I'd grown up in Toronto. I was always the young kid, right? I started playing in bars when I was about 13 or 14, and I never had a problem getting gigs because I was a novelty. I was this young kid that was playing music, and I was big, so I could get into the bars. They didn't really ask me anything.
Yeah.
But when I moved out west, man, it was at a time when there was a lot of people, especially musicians, moving all across the country because the scene had kind of died in Ontario.
Okay.
And I couldn't get a gig if my life depended on it. Like, I just was having a real hard time. So I decided I had to learn how to sing. So I started, finding a couple of songs, and I'd sing them at open mics and try and drum up some work. And then one day I got a call from a guy and said, "Listen, we need someone to sing for our band at this house gig that we do every week." So I said, great, all right, I can do it. Like, just, I thought it was a one-off.
Yeah.
So I literally learned an entire night's worth of music in a week.
Wow.
And I went and I sang the night, and great, awesome. And then they said, "Well, you want to do it again next week?" I said, "Yeah, awesome." And I came back next week and I did exactly the same set. and then I said, if you need someone ever again, give me a call. And he says, "What do you mean? You've already got the gig? It's your gig." So then I, within a couple of weeks, I had completely changed the band. They were a sort of R&B blues band, and but all the musicians were military jazz musicians, because there's a huge military band in Victoria, the Naden Band.
Okay. And
those guys were, they had to work from 8 o'clock in the morning till noon, and that was their day. So they are just raging children, right?
Yeah.
So I said, "Well, you guys are all jazz musicians, so screw this. I'm making this and swing had just started." So,
sure.
I think Setzer had just put out his first swing record, and so I made it into a swing band. It was the Smoking Jackets, and I worked with that band for quite a long time.
Yeah. Your guitar playing is stellar, but your singing is equally stellar, and it is. It brings an authenticity to it completes your authenticity.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Well,
yeah.
I listen to a lot of Tony Bennett.
Okay.
If you're going to listen to a singer from that time period,
yeah,
Tony Bennett's a good choice.
Yeah.
At least for the male singers. There's and Tommy Duncan, and there's so many great singers, but yeah, I listen to a lot of Tony Bennett.
Yeah. Well, Tony Bennett doesn't have your baritone voice.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I remember seeing a video of you. I don't know, it was a few years back, of you doing Bing Crosby's "Buddy, Can You Spare a Dime?"
Oh yes, yeah.
That was, I fell in love with your voice right there. And then on your website you have Moonglow, and that is just like, oh my God, that's the stuff.
I love that era of music.
Oh,
I still love. That's what I played when I first started singing. That's what I sang. I didn't sing rock music. I didn't sing blues music. I sang American songbook stuff, right? And I love that stuff. And I in fact, the new Cousin Harley record is called Cousin Harley Plays the Blues Volume 1, which I thought the Volume 1 was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that. And, I'll probably do a lot of those tunes because we're doing all like late 40s jump swing music. Uh-huh.
Is this album already recorded, or are you recording it?
Oh, it's done. It's done. I got a note the other day that the pressings are in. We're doing it only on vinyl. We're doing it with a record label. It's the first record I've done on a label that wasn't mine since the very first Cousin Harley record. Everything else has been on my own label.
Okay.
We're doing it with Cellar Jazz Live, which is a jazz label here in Vancouver.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all done, and it's a big band.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to hear it. I definitely want to hear it. When did you do those the instructional videos? How long ago was that?
Oh, that was when dinosaurs walked the earth. So.
Oh, yeah.
I think I did them. So I moved to China in 2000.
What?
Yeah, I lived in China for a while.
Why? Wait, hold on. Let's just stop there. Why did you move to China?
Why does any man do anything?
Women.
Of course it was a woman. So I moved to China, and then I came back. So I think I would have probably done them in about 2003 or 2004, maybe, somewhere around there. And, we did some promotions for them, and they did okay. In fact, they did pretty well. It was a very small company that was primarily, mining the musicians from the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
But then I had a student, now he's just a buddy, who took it upon himself to promote that DVD because he thought, he said, I learned a crazy amount of stuff from that DVD. So he started putting, this is when I'm still learning about the internet at this point, because like I said, I'm a bit of a Luddite. But he got hooked up with the Gretsch pages, and he started promoting it and telling people about it, and then, they just went nuts. Like, I sold, I don't know how many thousands of copies of that.
Wow.
It was a lot.
And do you still have the guitar from those videos?
Oh yeah, that 350's not going anywhere.
That was a cool 350.
Mm.
Is that how you? Are the videos what hooked you up with Fender and Gretsch and all, or?
In a strange way, yeah, because we got booked to play Viva.
Okay.
And this was again a long time ago. It would have been. I can tell you what year it would have been. Would have been 2000 and the spring of 2009. So we, and there's no money in Viva. I knew I was going to go lose money, but I said, it doesn't matter. We got to play Viva.
Yeah.
And, someone posted on the Gretsch pages that Cousin Harley was playing Viva. And someone said, hey, we'd really like to meet you. Can you meet us at the Gretsch booth? Because I guess, I didn't know anything about Gretsch at that point. I only played Gibsons.
Sure.
So I said, yeah, I'll meet you there. So I went to the Gretsch booth and I met a bunch of people, and then someone introduced me to Joe Carducci, and he said, would you like to play our gear that night?
Yeah.
And I had brought my 65 ES 125 TDC with me, and I still have that guitar. I'm very fond of that guitar.
Yeah, that's a nice guitar.
And I said, well, I kind of have the guitar I want to play, but how about this? I'll play your whole rig if I can use. This is when they had just started making those Victoria amplifiers. Mm-hmm. So I said, if I can play the executive amplifier, I'll play whatever you got for guitars. And I thought I was going to play the guitar for about a couple of songs, but they handed me a Black Falcon, and I loved it. I played the whole show on it, and then I got off stage, and Joe came up to me and said, what's your mailing address? And he says, okay, this rig is being sent to your house tomorrow.
Wow.
And I want to have a meeting with you tomorrow morning. And then, I became the clinician for those years that was happening. So
yeah, right on. Right on. That's great. I mean, I think that's probably the first time I saw you was playing at the Gretsch booth, and I don't remember what year.
Oh, yeah.
Not to bring up potentially a bad subject, but what does a Canadian musician do in China for years?
Well, I was only there for about a year.
Okay.
And, I went, of course, for love, and that didn't work out. But it didn't work out until I got back, because they never returned. But... it's funny. I've been back since. I had this great experience. So, I went out with my girl at the time, and she was considerably younger than me. And she took me to this expat bar where all the foreigners would hang out and drink. And they had a band, like a Chinese band playing Chinese pop music.
Okay. And
then someone said, hey, we hear that Paul's a musician, and they convinced them to let me up on stage. So I went up on stage and I played probably Moonglow or some kind of Joe Pass thing.
Okay, yeah.
I played some Joe Pass stuff, and by the end of that night, everybody in the band, even though none of them spoke English, I spoke no Chinese. Uh-huh. They were all my students.
Oh wow!
Even the drummer, and I know nothing about the drums, but they just wanted, because they didn't know about this type of jazz music. Like, this was early 2000s, right? Yeah. People were just getting private cars at that point in China. Like, China was China still.
Yeah.
And they all became my students. And, I was teaching at a university. I was teaching English at a university because that's what you do to get into the country. But, I was teaching music a lot of the time. Uh-huh. And that was a great experience. I learned a lot about teaching when you don't have language.
Sure. Yeah.
So, like, trying to describe swing. Like, I would take an egg, I would take an egg and I'd put a dot on either side of it.
Yeah.
And then I'd roll it. And go, look at the dot. Funk, fa-funk, 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 fa-funk. I would do all kinds of crazy stuff. And I've been back since. I was playing with a musician who goes over to China usually quite regularly. And I did a couple of tours with him. And one of my old students got in touch with me. Uh-huh. And he flew all the way from, he lives in Shanghai, because I was living in Nanjing, and Shanghai and Nanjing are relatively close together.
Okay.
You know, in the grand scheme of China.
Uh-huh.
And he flew all the way to Beijing to see me play, and I asked him how he's doing, and he is the like the number one gypsy jazz guitar player
right on
in China, and they had no idea who Django Reinhardt was, they had no idea who Les Paul was, had no idea who Charlie Christian was. I turned them on to all that music.
Wow.
And it was really cool. And then I got, like, about 3 months ago, I got a friend request, and now with Facebook, I check everybody out because it's all bots, and so I checked this guy out, and I'm going, this young Asian guitar player in Toronto, and I checked out a little clip of him playing, and he's playing like 1930s jazz swing music, and I go, oh, that's interesting. So I drilled down on him, and it turns out he's from Shanghai. So I sent him a note, and I said, you wouldn't by chance know my student, Johnny Fay? He says, yes, of course I know Johnny Fay. Johnny is the one who told me to check you out.
Oh, wow.
So, that was a great experience, teach all those guys. But Johnny was like, Johnny was like a long-haired, metal guitar player playing, a jam or something, or something like a gem. And Chinese pop music was very ballad-oriented and with screaming, lyrical guitar solos.
Yeah.
And to see how he changed into being like Django Reinhardt.
That's great. Have you traveled internationally outside of China?
Yeah, I've been through most of Europe.
Okay.
I've been through Australia. Of course, your fine country. I've played in Mexico a fair amount because I play a festival in Mexico almost every year. Uh-huh. I haven't been to South America. Have not been to South America. Have not been to
Africa.
Have not been to Africa. Okay. Have not been. I would love to, but
sure,
it's a long way to go.
It's a long way to go. Antarctica.
Not a lot of gigs in Antarctica. No. Man, the drives are brutal. The drives are brutal there.
Oh, but you're used to them.
That's true. And in sub-freezing temperatures, yes, we are used to them. That's
right. Do you do all your booking of yourself? Do you have a booking agent, or how do you get gigs?
I do them all myself now. For many years, I had a manager, and she was of amazing help. She got sick a few years ago, and man, she was so lucky. She just decided in 2019, she said, you know what, I can't do it anymore. And she retired right before the pandemic started. Wow. It's like, well, if you're going to retire, that's the time to do it.
For sure.
And yeah, I've been doing it all myself since, which is, of course, why I'm not on the road as much as I used to. And plus, I'm 55 now, man. It's,
Oh, you're a kid.
Well, I was talking to a bunch of younger kids, and they were talking about, we're going to go down, we're going to go here, and we're going to go there, and they're going, man, I'm exhausted by just thinking about that. Yeah. But then, if it's me and the guys, if it's me and Jesse and our new bass player Jeremy, yeah, I'd go out because it's always a good time with those guys.
Is it easier to book yourself as Cousin Harley, or how does it work out?
I think it's about 50-50, Cousin Harley has a solid following.
Sure.
But Paul Pigat, I like going out and doing solo stuff because I've got the boxcar campfire stuff, and I can take some of the more rock and Cousin Harley stuff, like the less hillbilly stuff and the more rock Cousin Harley stuff, and I can change it and I can make it into like acoustic music.
Sure.
And I really like doing that. So that's kind of one thing I've been working on a lot. But, it's, I got someone inquired from Sweden asking if Cousin Harley would come. And I said, of course we're going to come. And they said, well, what do you need? And I told them what I need.
Yeah.
And it's been radio silence ever since. Because, I've been doing this professionally since I'm 55 now. I've been doing it since I was 13. So that's a long
42
time.
years.
32 years, yeah. So, that's a long time. So now I'm the old bull. I'm the old bull on the top of the hill, and I go, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait until I see what I want, and then I'll go for it.
You're still a kid to me.
Thanks.
So if people wanted to, if they wanted to find out what you're doing, how do they go about that? I know you have a website, paulpigat.com, but
it's so incredibly edited.
Yeah, not a lot of dates on that.
No, I'm terrible with you. I've never kept that website up to date. No, Facebook or Instagram. Okay. That's where I post stuff now. It's because everybody's on it. Yeah. People are always on social media. To actually make someone go directly to a website seems kind of counterintuitive now that there's so much information out there.
Yeah.
They're readily streaming, right? Just constantly. So yeah, I generally do it just on socials. That's how I sell my guitars too.
Oh, is it really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I just post a photograph of 2 raw bodies or something like that, 2 rough cut bodies, and I said, these are the next 2 on the block. Who wants them? And then someone will hopefully buy them. And it's been going crazy, really.
Good. What about lessons? So do you still teach private lessons?
I do. I have my private in-person students, and then I still do online Skype lessons.
Okay.
And I also have a Patreon school. Which I started up at the beginning of the pandemic. Uh-huh. And I usually do, I was doing about a lesson a week, a 10-minute lesson a week.
Okay.
Of whatever I think, takes my fancy. Or, I let my students, I said, if you guys have suggestions, just let me know. But most of the time, they just let me do whatever I want. And, so I've been doing it a little less now, usually maybe a lesson every maybe 3 lessons a month or 2 lessons a month now, because there are hundreds of lessons.
Yeah.
Because they're all, once you sign up, you have access to everything.
Wow.
So you want to talk about flat 5 substitutions? All right, there's probably about 6 lessons on that. You want to talk about hillbilly music? Okay, there's a bunch of lessons on that. Yeah. So, I have to keep finding new stuff.
Well, that's great. So the Patreon, is it just Paul Pigat? Just look under that? Or?
Yeah, just look up my name and there it is.
Right on. Jeez, this has been wonderful, Paul.
It's been a blast. You're in Napa, right?
I'm in Napa, California, yeah.
That's what I thought. I thought you were in Napa. Well, if I find myself anywhere near Napa, I would like to go out and maybe have a glass of wine with you.
You know what? I'll be buying you the wine all day long. and likewise, I hope I find myself up in your neck of the woods here someday. Anytime.
I had a couple of guys. In fact, one of the guitars I'm doing right now is for one of the guys. I had 2 guys show up. I do an annual gig in Vancouver. Okay. I only pay. This shows you how either how lazy I am or how dedicated I am to make more, play less. One show within the city limits of Vancouver every year, just one. That's all.
Wow.
And it's at a big theater, and we do it every year. And I had these, not this year, but last year, I finished the show, and I saw these 2 guys. They obviously wanted to talk to me, and I was in the middle of a conversation with somebody, so they waited around, and then they talked, and they came up, and I said, where are you guys from? And they said, we're from Dallas. I said, what are you doing in Vancouver? I said, well, we flew out to see you.
Wow.
I said, you flew all the way from Dallas to see Cousin Harley play. He says, yeah, well, you never come to Texas anymore. I said, well, I haven't been to Texas in a long time. And both of those guys have bought guitars.
Oh, right on. That's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So, it's not that far. Come on, you don't have to buy a guitar. Just come on up. It's usually in the fall. It's a lovely time of year in Vancouver.
Okay, great. That's when I'm coming.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul.
My pleasure. You take care.
Yeah, you too. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, man.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Have Guitar Will Travel. You can catch up on all the things I'm doing at thedeadlies.com, and I'm on all the social media platforms as well. And please support Vintage Guitar and all the wonderful things they do, because they do many, many wonderful things for us guitar players. Thanks. Please subscribe. Please tell a friend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.